Reference: Quick summary of Alfred Russel Wallace, 1823-1913, was one of the 19th century's most remarkable intellectuals. Not only did he co-discover the process of evolution by natural selection with Charles Darwin in 1858, but he also made very many other significant contributions, not just to biology, but also to subjects as diverse as glaciology, land reform, anthropology, ethnography, epidemiology, and astrobiology. His pioneering work on evolutionary biogeography, the study of how plants and animals are distributed, led to him becoming recognized as that subject's father. Beyond this, Wallace is regarded as the preeminent collector and field biologist of tropical regions of the 19th century, and his book The Malay Archipelago, which was Joseph Conrad's favorite bedside reading, is one of the most celebrated travel writings of that century and has never been out of print. Add to the above that Wallace was deeply committed to, and a vocal supporter of spiritualism, socialism, and the rights of the ordinary person, and it quickly becomes apparent that he was a man with an extraordinary breadth of interests, who was actively engaged with many of the big questions and important issues of his day. By the time of his death, 1913, Wallace was probably the world's most famous scientist, but since then, his intellectual legacy has been almost completely overshadowed by Darwin's, largely thanks to the Darwin industry of recent decades. See Wikipedia. This industry has led to a highly Darwinocentric view of the history of modern biology, and, as a result, many of the important contributions made by Darwin's contemporaries, like Wallace, are currently underestimated and undervalued. Co-inventor of evolution with Darwin, Alfred Wallace, ripping into scientific resistance. Wallace's headline, "Trains are impossible, so is street lighting," from leading scientists. Alfred Wallace here notes that Victorians had arisen into their midst self-chosen groups of people, claiming scientific qualification, method, and virtue, to become a virtual new priesthood, officially deciding what was real and possible via their informed proclamations for the general public. Here he points out the numerous false proclamations of said scientists and the built-in major errors and risks of listening too much to scientists generally. He starts with the already overdeveloped public notion of the necessity of scientific testimony. Wallace writes, "Another objection which I have heard stated in public, and received with applause, is that it requires immense scientific knowledge to decide on the reality of any uncommon or incredible facts, and that till scientific men investigate and prove them, they are not worthy of credit." Now I venture to say that a greater fallacy, and this, was never put forth. The subject is very important, and the error is very common, but the fact is the exact opposite of what is stated, for I assert, without fear of contradiction, that whenever the scientific men of any age have denied the facts of investigators on a priori grounds, they have always been wrong. It is not necessary to do more than refer to the world-known names of Copernicus, Galileo, and Harvey. The great discoveries they made were, as we know, violently opposed by all their scientific contemporaries, to whom they appeared absurd and incredible, but we have equally striking examples much nearer to our own day. When Benjamin Franklin brought the subject of lightning conductors before the Royal Society, he was laughed at as a dreamer, and his paper was not admitted to the Philosophical Transactions. When Young put forth his wonderful proofs of the undulatory theory of light, he was equally hooted at as absurd by the popular scientific writers of the day. The Edinburgh Review called upon the public to put Thomas Gray into a straitjacket for maintaining the practicability of railroads. Sir Humphrey Davy, inventor of the miner's lamp, laughed at the idea of London ever being lighted with gas. When Stephenson proposed to use locomotives on the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, learned men gave evidence that it was impossible that they could go even 12 miles an hour. Another great scientific authority declared it to be equally impossible for ocean steamers ever to cross the Atlantic. The French Academy of Sciences ridiculed the great astronomer Arago when he wanted even to discuss the subject of the electric telegraph. Medical men ridiculed the stethoscope when it was first discovered. Painless operations during the mesmeric coma were pronounced impossible and therefore impostures. Scientific things must be dead. They must cooperate by not speaking back to scientists. The uncertainty of the asserted phenomena of modern spiritualism. Co-inventor of evolution Alfred Wallace goes on to say, Another modern argument is used, more especially against the reality of the so-called spiritual phenomena. It is said, these phenomena are so uncertain, you have no control over them, they follow no law. Prove to us that they follow definite laws, like all other groups of natural phenomena, and we will believe them. This argument appears to have weight with some persons, and yet it is really an absurdity. The essence of the alleged phenomena, whether they be true or not is of no importance, is that they seem to be the result of the action of independent intelligences, and are therefore deemed to be spiritual or superhuman. If they had been found to follow strict law, and not independent will, no one would have ever supposed them to be spiritual. The argument, therefore, is merely the statement of a foregone conclusion, namely, as long as your facts go to prove the existence of distinct intelligences, we will not believe them. Demonstrate that they follow fixed law, and not intelligence, and then we will believe them. This argument appears to me to be childish, and yet it is used by some persons who claim to be philosophical. A strong desire for a dead universe that never talks back. Does that sound familiar? Online pseudoskeptic evolutionists today, a century later, write heavily in favor of utter and total death, extinguishment. It's an unspoken irrational insistence that science, as they want it, must be autistic, which these aggrieved skeptic proponents take upon themselves, pushing their own alternative scarecrow version, called scientism. Wallace's contribution to verification of mediums and afterlife is meticulous and noteworthy. He deserves more airplay. A couple of his books linked below.